Hi, my name is Catherine Lennartz, and I'm a second-year PhD student in the History of Art and Architecture department at BU. I had the opportunity to work as a curatorial intern at the Institute of Contemporary Art Boston as part of the PhD summer internship in the Humanities program. This internship and many others was made possible by the Sabancia Experiential Learning Fund in the Humanities, the BU Office of the Associate Provost for Graduate Affairs, the BU Center for the Humanities, and of course, the whole team at the ICA Boston who welcomed me this summer. I'd like to especially thank Jeff Debrois, Associate Curator and Publications Manager, who was a thoughtful and generous mentor throughout my internship. Despite working in museums before starting my doctoral studies, this was the first time I got to participate in curatorial work directly. So this was an amazing opportunity for me to gain experience and to really get a sense of the day-to-day, not only of the curators, but the registrars and preparators who worked around me. My main project this summer was an exhibition called Forecast Form: Art in the Caribbean Diaspora, 1990s to Today. There's a surprising amount to unpack in the title alone. The idea of diaspora allows for an understanding of the geographic region that isn't so static and speaks to the migrations that most of the region's inhabitants have experienced, and how this movement affects identity and a sense of belonging. The time period, the 90s to today, further informs the themes that come up again and again in this exhibition. I also really love the way the word forecast has so many meanings for this show. It hints at the Haitian Revolution that marked the Caribbean as the first place to host an insurrection that fought for the concept of human rights, forecasting so many more to come. And forecast, of course, also relates to the weather, an inescapable part of island living under the threat of tropical storms. And so in a way, the artists in this show are inviting us to explore forms, not only the history and geographies they grapple with, but the forms that they may be forecasting for the future. It's important to note that Forecast Form is a traveling exhibition. It's coming to the ICA from the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago. This means it comes to us fully formed, as it were. So the work to be done at the ICA and my main project over the summer was that of adopting and adapting the exhibition for Boston. My first task, and one that I worked on throughout the summer, was to gather the reading materials that the original curators in Chicago considered when they were first conceptualizing the show. For Forecast Form, this meant looking at a few things. First, reading about some of the earliest exhibitions that were created around the idea of the Caribbean. And the second focus of my research was to read about some of the Caribbean authors and thinkers who influenced not only the curators of the show, but many of the artists themselves. And so I got to read Edouard Glissant, Frank Bowling, Stuart Hall, and Krista Thompson in an effort to better understand the region and its culture. The outcome of this first phase of research was the creation of some critical research dossiers that will be made available to other departments in the ICA as they prepare for the opening of the exhibition. This will help fill out people's understanding and inform the creation of communications and marketing materials, education programs, and help to prepare tours. The next phase of my research was about each of the artists themselves. And so for almost all 29 artists, I wrote short biographies and listed the other group exhibitions that they participated in that focused on the Caribbean or other regional aspects of their work. The artist profiles I wrote also included information about the artworks presenting in our exhibition, and a critical discussion of their practices based on interviews and academic articles that they've been featured in. It was really helpful to me to discover so many artists during this research that connect to my own academic interests based in commemorative art, memory making, and identity, especially in relation to globalization and post-colonialism. It's all this research I conducted about the artists, the history, and the philosophies related to the Caribbean that allowed me to then tackle work on the show's didactics. We received introductory and section wall texts, as well as extended labels from the museum in Chicago, and these needed to be adapted. Before my arrival at the ICA, the texts were shared broadly among staff, and a focus group formulated recommendations on how they might be improved, or at least adapted, to better suit our audience here in Boston. Because many of the artists address violence, racism, slavery, and other kinds of trauma in their work, we wanted to make sure that the text offered clear language that wasn't too academic, that the individuals referred to were humanized, and that the concepts regarding history and culture weren't too abstract. And we wanted to really try to think critically about which narratives were being omitted. And so based on this feedback, it was my job to read through the text and suggest edits that would maintain the spirit and objectives of the show, but also reflect the ICA's values and concerns. This was a really interesting exercise for me, to not be writing something from scratch, but to be considering a previous author's voice and ideas, and then trying to implement even more people's suggestions into fairly short and concise texts. This process, of course, took some time, and I'm really grateful to Jeff for taking the time to go over some of the texts with me, to answer my questions, and to really encourage me to think critically about every sentence. Apart from forecast form, I was also able to use some of the expertise I developed in my previous museum work to lend a hand on an upcoming catalog which will be published in conjunction with the Firulai Baez survey exhibition. I spent some time tracking down some of the images we wanted to feature in the catalog's essays and obtaining licenses for their use in the catalog. I was also very welcome to attend many of the meetings the department held while I was there, in which I always learned something new about the intricacies of shipping large-scale artworks or maintaining pools of water within gallery spaces that had never been designed for that purpose. I'd like to thank everyone in the curatorial department who welcomed me and took the time to talk with me and answer my questions throughout the summer. Of course, Jeff, my mentor, but also Ruth, Annie, Tessa, Brianne, Allison, Tim, Megan, and Liv. I'm really grateful for the opportunity I had this summer to take some of the research skills I've learned in the classroom and apply them to such an ambitious and rigorously put together exhibition. It'll be coming to the ICA October 5th, 2023, and running through February of the following year. I hope to see you there.